In the past, esotericism was found in closed baths. Only a small number of people had access to it. From all those special services of ours in Russia, exclusive brothers, a sensation. So there's a layer, roughly speaking, at the level of the president, which practically never makes any decisions. There are higher levels.
What are these higher levels?
Those very curators, remember? And then there's the really interesting part. You start to see an astral entity, certain shadows in the corners. You can see not only your past life, but also your past appearance. And all the options for your future life. You can see the day of your death. Well, or you can see the options for the day of your death. It's just such a fantasy.
You have an interesting story, that you discovered many of these things within yourself since childhood. What is it like when you're a little kid, and the adults don't really understand you? What is it like to be a child like that?
I actually had it even worse because I wasn't just a slightly strange kid. Yes, I also stuttered terribly. It was just terrible. I stuttered. I couldn't say a single word. I had a series of hi, and that was it. My speech just shut down. So, in that sense, it was probably more difficult for me in the VD war. But on the other hand, a person who stutters, they probably evoke some kind of maybe pity or something like that. Discrepancy, probably. Discrepancy, yes. And so people treated me like a slightly strange person. But gently. That is, roughly speaking, I studied at Moscow State University, and the tests there were taken quite leniently because they knew I was a bit nervous. So they tried not to bother me too much.
Well, now you don't stutter? Now you speak well? Just a little. What happened?
What was the trigger that made you work through all of this, including the higher stuff?
I was just thinking, what kind of program is this? And why did you choose such a program that interests you in life? But if you came in stuttering, and actually up until college, if you say you took exams while stuttering, yes, that's quite a serious program. They say that we create and choose everything ourselves.
Why did you choose such a program for yourself? I've watched this topic several times. Let's put it this way. If I were to describe it as simply as possible, because there's a lot of multidimensional information there. Usually when you enter higher education, there are so many layers right away, and you unpack whatever you can. So, to put it very simply, I needed to protect myself from certain things, for example, from alcohol. My path is very clean, meaning I've never drunk alcohol in my life. I'm not aware what it tastes like, beer, wine, and so on. Plus, my wife, she's absolutely the first person for me. I mean, before her, I had no one in any sense. So I didn't kiss anyone there. And all of this is a very significant part of my journey. A very significant part, because it's this certain direction towards purity. And overcoming certain problems. So with stuttering and all sorts of fears, I used to have a lot of fears and other things, and that all intensified. Contact with the spirit. Because my goal, my mission in this life, I've watched this 1,500,000 times in higher education. It's precisely the higher self that I am. It's about channeling the energy of the higher self, regardless of whether I'm doing it, so to speak, for free or for a fee, whether I have many viewers or just a few. This is my mission. My mission, basically, throughout my whole life, I've been focused solely on this topic. So I was in school for 11 years, and it was in May of that year. And before that, many years ago, even before school, from the very early childhood, I've touched on the topic of the higher self, more or less.
Listen, it's interesting. We often get comments like these. By the way, thank you so much for writing them. We did them. It's interesting, but the fact that you've never tried alcohol, I've met people like that. I've met people who have never tried meat in their lives. And there's this opinion. I've read opinions that this happens out of some kind of fear, that a person is afraid of something and they're scared to go there. How do you agree with that? In terms of the sixth to some extent.
Yes, at the level of the mind, the mental body, the physical body, the etheric astral, the mental higher bodies of the spirit. So, at the level of the mind, it's fear, it doesn't happen. The mental body, the physical body, the etheric astral, the mental higher bodies of the spirit. So, at the level of the mind, yes, it's probably some kind of fear, but again, it doesn't just happen. Consequences without a cause. Since I came from a family that instilled this fear in me, I had a very specific family. So, my father drank, and I just realized I don't want to be like that.
So I had a childhood trauma.
Well, to some extent, yes. But it really pushed me forward. It's precisely about a certain pure path. Because the path of the higher self, in the way that I describe it to everyone there, in my texts, in interviews, and so on, it's a path that is as pure as possible. This is not a contact with the higher self. I don't know, through channeling, through regression hypnosis, or through direct contact, or something else. It's the path of pure. It's identification. Everything I do is the path. Classical, ancient, very ancient meditation, disidentification. When you let go, everything, completely and entirely everything. Meditation, disidentification when you let go, everything in general, completely and entirely everything. So that includes all manifestations of the physical, all manifestations of the mind, all manifestations of that very astral body, of the etheric body. And at some point, your inner essence starts to reveal itself. The true essence, it just starts to reveal itself naturally at some point in the process of disidentification, as I call it. But is this a permanent state? Or is it a state that means you sat down to meditate?
I came in, yes.
In the early stages, yes. If a person is just starting to explore this topic, naturally he has a strong mind, a strong current personality, strong beliefs, including blocks of fear and so on. They then pull him back after the experience. So yes, he sat down. Maybe he went deep and was able to disidentify to such a level where he has this inner purity, his inner goodness. The light and everything else opened up. But then naturally he comes back, he's pulled back by his old, well, let's call them neural connections. Yes, but over time, if you do this many, many times, then you build up a certain luminosity. But it turns out that you build up a certain luminosity.
But turns out that you have. So, do you mean to say that you have a constant connection? So, you don't need to sit down to meditate. You have a personal, constant connection with your family, yours.
Let's put it this way. Indeed, a certain level, a certain depth, it is constant.
Okay.
But if I need to go deeper, then of course I go deeper.
And what will happen if you drink alcohol?
What do you think?
I think at this stage, nothing. Okay. And you say that I don't need any regressive hypnosis. You use the word meditation. There is an opinion that meditation and hypnosis are the same thing. How do you feel about that?
Again, we run into terms. What does a person mean by hypnosis? What does a person mean by meditation? In a certain sense, yes, it can be the same thing.
Well, let's try to come to an agreement. So everything we do in meditation, we are somehow switching the mode of brain activity. Well, yes. In what style? Are we conditionally switching off? There are studies that show that we have 80,000 thoughts manifesting in our heads every day, and we only manage about 10% of them. So it's like a hammer, but it works. And all we can do is manage those 10%. And those 90%, those 10% out of 80,000, 90% of them are occupied with some kind of trash too. Yeah, some kind of trash too. Yes. And the task, as I've heard it, as I understand it, in meditation is to turn off. Here is this threshing machine. Here are these monkeys with the plates that beat, and to focus on other things. I understand that hypnosis does the same thing because it switches things up.
Yeah, but I would dig a little deeper into this topic. Let's go. Yeah, let's do it.
Danil talks a lot about the higher self, about the fact that we not only have a physical body, but we have, let's call it layered. That's my interpretation. A layered pie of energy bodies, which is all interconnected. So in this interview, we want to get to the bottom of this. First of all, about the higher self, about the connection of these subtle energy bodies, these chakras, energy channels. Everyone talks about this all the time. And still, today we will try to get to the very essence of it. By the way, write comments if something is unclear to you, and we'll shoot more on that. So in a person, as you say, there is a set of subtle bodies. Let's figure out what this is. Why not subtle, and what is this all about?
So, there are these bodies. There's the physical body, which includes the arms, legs, and head, and everyone knows that. There's the etheric body, formerly known as the etheric body. Again, from what I'm sharing here, I only know from my experience that the etheric body is the body of life energy. It kind of goes a little beyond the physical body, but at the same time, all these channels and meridians are still inside. It's magical from ancient Chinese medicine. It kind of goes a little beyond the physical body, but at the same time, all these channels and meridians are still inside. It's magical from ancient Chinese medicine. Well described. They intertwine all the organs and nourish certain parts of the physical body. There is also a certain version, yes, that Dantian's 3 centers in Qigong. This is specifically about the etheric body. I once spoke with a very experienced Qigong practitioner, Here we are in Moscow. So he kind of says that, yes, this is related to the etheric body. The next body is the astral body. Emotions show. Love is pink, envy green, anger red. Astral body extends outward. So, I don't know. Roughly speaking, if a person loves someone, you can see bright pink flashes. If someone is envious of someone else, it might look like a murky green, like envy in a swamp. If someone is angry, there could be some brick red flashes and so on. The astral body, it kind of extends out like this much, so it can also be seen. So somewhere, well, maybe up to a year, if a person is really has certain predispositions. So I usually tell the guys, look, it's been a year if they've been working on this topic. In fact, according to any books, so there are countless books on this topic.
But why see it at all?
What does it give? That's a good question. I would put it this way. To understand that this is actually real. What is everything we're talking about here? It's real. This is first and foremost. Of course, you can do it like Lobson Cramp. His book suggests sitting and looking from behind a screen and trying to see like certain emotions of a person. He says, truth or lies. Basically, this is done through the astral body, but maybe there's a faster method. So when a person lies, what happens to them in the astral body can be seen. The emotions of lying will show up as some dirty flashes like murky green or dirty red and so on. And yes, there is the astral body. Yes, there is the astral body and there is the mental body. The mental body, it's the same. That is, formally, it's divided into consciousness and the subconscious. Well, I mean, again, the mental body is multi-layered. So there are deeper layers of this very mental body. And there are layers that are closer to the physical, layers of the mental body. Deeper layers of this very body. The mind has layers that are closer to the physical, layers of the mental body. Mind, you can also imagine how I see this again. Like some kind of computer that, is it programmed over time?
Can we say that my brain, like any living organ, has a certain electromagnetic radiation or some kind of radiation, and all my thoughts that exist, they are reflected in this electromagnetic radiation. And this is exactly that body. Or is that wrong?
It's hard to say, but basically, probably yes, there is definitely some electromagnetic radiation there. It's just not measured in strength. And well, some kind of radiation, which is laid out, radiation, that which.
And any thought that crosses my mind, for example, that I ate a spoiled omelet for breakfast, it flex there. That's a thought. All right, now let's move on. So there is the mental body and further.
And regarding the mental body, if we again use this scheme that I'm talking about right now, so all these bodies, the physical, the etheric, the astral, the mental, these are conditionally mortal bodies. Because after death, they still disintegrate in one form or another. And then there's the really interesting part. There are mortal bodies, and these immortal bodies are also multi-layered. They're described in different books. Some say there are karmic, Buddhic, atmanic bodies, and some also highlight the causal body and so on. It's not that important. Actually, for me, in the practice that I've been in my whole life, as far back as I can remember, there is a mortal body and there is an immortal body.
Great.
Actually, this is the simplest of the simple.
Help me then to dig a little deeper here. Let's go through each topic right now, because there's a lot of information. Where it resonates, there are often references that the chakras are also related to this. But I want to talk specifically about the functions of each body, how they differ, what are they responsible for, and why do we need them at all? Why do we need such a layered cake? So let's start with the simplest. Well, I have hands and legs, thank God, everything works. And how? So next you say that there is the etheric body. Yes. How? Is the etheric body connected to physics? What is it even like? And is it somehow attached or does it float around separately? Tell me about it.
Well, as I see it, the etheric body is always with you. It's your etheric double. It's a combination of all sorts of channels, meridians, that is, all these energy ones. I would partly call it, this is going to sound extremely strange, energy doubles of your internal organs. So I have a liver. There is, so to speak, an etheric double of this very liver, which is part of the etheric body. It doesn't really look like a liver. It's a combination of certain energy channels that wrap around the liver, but essentially these are the channels that specifically serve the liver. If I get drunk, you don't drink. That's clear. Maybe we talked about it. But if I get drunk and my liver suffers, then what happens to this etheric body? Well, the etheric body, first of all, at the physical level, it tries to cleanse itself. And at the etheric level, it also tries to participate in the cleansing of your liver.
This is often found in esotericism. There's an opinion that everything first happens on the subtle plane and then gets projected onto the physical So let's take the same example. If I get drunk, still, these changes first occurred on an energetic level, either on a physical level or you've like conditionally hit alcohol. So how does this happen? Can you just say it?
I am P. I suspect that it happens simultaneously. After all, so if a person drinks, chemical processes start in the liver, and at the same time, the etheric body is already activated. And if, as they say in esotericism, everything starts from there, this primarily concerns, roughly speaking, not hitting your finger with a hammer, because if you take a hammer and hit your finger, your etheric body and physical body signal at the same time.
Okay.
Still, as I see it, this is more about all sorts of blocks, certain beliefs, traumas, and so on, which are initially born in the mental body, then descend down into the astral body and into the etheric body, about all sorts of blocks, certain beliefs, traumas, and so on, which are initially born in the mental body, then descend down into the astral body, into the etheric body. That very psychosomatics that everyone loves so much right now. And then it is temporarily expressed physically.
This is a cool thing. We're actually going to talk about that now. Let's talk. Okay, so every living cell has, let's call it some kind of energy emission. Small one, and this makes up the etheric body, to simplify it. Yes, there is the astral body. What is that?
The astral body is already more of a less physical body, definitely. This is no longer the etheric, meaning it's not as dense a layer. By the way, the etheric layer, among other things, vibrates with the etheric layer of planet Earth. It might also be worth mentioning here, it vibrates with the astral layer of planet Earth. All right, we'll get back to that too.
So we don't complicate things. So there is the astral layer.
What is that?
Is it also some kind of energy shell?
Yes, it's an energy shell. This is what is commonly referred to as the term aura. What they do in these aura chambers, in aura photography, when you see that overall halo, that's the astral body.
Why do they even take astral photographs of you? I've heard this idea that, for example, if I was walking up the stairs and tripped, my mood would change and my aura would change too. The next day I came back, and as I was walking up the stairs, my aura was already normal. So it's a very dynamic thing. So why take those photos then?
Listen, I'm not that big. Actually, I'm an aura specialist because I want the viewers to hear this too. I've been working through this in my life. This topic exclusively to interact with these bodies, effectively. It wasn't interesting to me. That's exactly about the study of the etheric body, the astral body. This is actually more about my wife because she's really strong. She's a psychic. She's really into this topic.
Write in the comments if you're interested in this topic, and we'll invite my wife and definitely interrogate her. We have a lot of questions.
But, my view on the astral body is solely my perspective on this topic. In the astral body, you can see, let's say, some dark spots. So yes, dark spots are already a certain disturbance of the astral body. So there might be some small entities. They're like larvae or something. Yeah, those parasites that scare us. Parasites, yes.
How are they connected to the astral ones? Everyone talks about the astral plane, astral entities.
They connect to the astral body, but what about the etheric? And they can also be on the etheric. But again, it depends on the entity. If it's from the etheric layer, then it affects the etheric body. If it's from the astral layer, then it affects the astral body.
So each layer has its own paradigms.
And if we talk about various out-of-body experiences, those can happen in both the astral body and the etheric body. These are different bodies, and these are absolutely different exits. They absolutely do. They look different because you find yourself in a different world.
But how can I leave my body if the physical body is connected to the etheric and is inseparably linked?
Doppelganger, copy, doppelganger. When you leave your body, it arises. This effect, a very peculiar effect, is called the etheric doppelganger effect. When you, in a way, your etheric body stays in the body, but at the same time, here's its imprint. You kind of separate it with your own consciousness, and this etheric imprint is already wandering around the etheric plane. I've been a bit involved with this topic, and it's really about the etheric exit. Well, the very dense world, you can really feel it. The connection is dense. It's as close as possible to the earthly plane according to our old plan. There can be all sorts of things, so to speak, like a flying cow in the sky that could be a gray-brown raspberry color and so on. And on the mental level, you can also have an exit in the mental body. It's a completely different story. What is the mental body? The mental body is, to put it simply, a combination of consciousness and from consciousness expressed in a certain energetic layer of us. That's if we put it very briefly.
How does it work? So conditionally, what I'm thinking about is in some kind of energy field around me.
Yes, I think so, actually. Yes.
And if I'm thinking about something good or something very bad, how does this energy field differ?
It will be felt. If a person knows how to work with the mental body, knows how to see the mental body, then they will definitely either see it or at least feel the mental body. This overall aura of heavier thoughts, more oppressive thoughts, will still hang in the field. So this is specifically in the mental body. And if a person is lighter, freer, more flexible, then their mental body will be much lighter too. You mentioned that psychosomatics. If a person is flexible, then their mental body will be much lighter.
You mentioned that psychosomatics arises from the mental body and affects everything in a chain.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
The simplest example, a person had an allergy. You go back to childhood regarding this allergy, you find the moment in childhood when this allergy first appeared. Usually it's some kind of situation, emotionally charged, definitely emotionally charged, meaning that in a way the rest of the body is formally involved. But the conclusion that a person made is written into the mental body. So yes, if we again represent the mental body as something conditional, software, and all the other bodies are like layers between physical and the software. The etheric body serves as the support layer for the physical, while the astral body is more connected to the chakras, but it's also a support layer for the physical. The etheric body serves as the support layer for the physical, while the astral body is more connected to the chakras, but it's also a support layer for the physical. And the mental body is like the software. There, it's more connected to chakras, but it's still a supporting layer for the physical. The mental body is like software. It records traumas, grievances, and incorrect conclusions about the world. If you work through them, allergies go away. You mentioned casually, go back to childhood, but what does that mean? How do you go back? The software records traumas, grievances, and incorrect conclusions about the world. If you work through them, allergies go away. And you mentioned it somewhat casually, like you go back to childhood, but what does that mean? How do you go back?
In ways,
Well, you can do it through progressive hypnosis with a good psychotherapist or with a good esoteric hypnotist who understands this topic. By the way, I have a very experienced psychotherapist in my course who has worked with a bunch of different guys. In general, he received his education from all sorts of our special services. Russian ones who worked with those coming from Afghanistan. He's a pure psychosomatic specialist. What he does, what he creates is just absolutely fantastic. So the guys come to him with very serious illnesses and they leave healthy. So he reprograms them exclusively at the level of the mental body. This is specifically if we're talking about the esoteric aspect. There's also esotericism.
this story is about the astral, higher astral. What's the difference? Is this linked with the astral body? Is it about one thing?
Formally, yes. Formally, from what I've seen on this topic, it's the same astral layer. The astral layer is broad and it's also multidimensional. So, the astral body that a person has only formally touches a small spectrum of this very astral layer of planet Earth. Here we're already talking about the astral layer, specifically of the whole Earth. Yes, and there are like more, those very lower worlds, including hellish astral worlds, yes. There are higher worlds and so on. Yes, that's true. So, there are subtle bodies that are called mortal, and that's again the etheric one.
Astral and mental?
Why are they mortal? Well, because after the death of the physical body, they gradually start to break down. But, by the way, what's interesting here is I want to make a digression. In the Rodnover tradition, there is something that perhaps some of the viewers know well. They divide it up. They don't talk about the astral body or the etheric one. They talk about spirit, soul, and then physics and the physical body. Well, formally, by the way, this topic I actually like more. It sounds more poetic, like spirit and soul, and here it's more like astrality, figurative bodies, yes. And the spirit is that very immortal part. I usually describe it like this. There lived a guy named Vasya. Vasya died, his body remained here, and Vasya flew away. Well, formally, he shifted into spirit. The spirit is also multidimensional. It's very multidimensional. The higher one is so multi-layered, and you keep going higher and higher, 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 higher. But formally, in the afterlife, we can very conditionally call that state in the afterlife. It's like this. Some more very down-to-earth parts of the spirit, very down-to-earth layers of the spirit.
We're just confusing our viewers a bit right now. Let's untangle this. We'll take this Vasya that you mentioned. So Vasya has a physical body, an etheric soul, but an astral one. It is precisely these that are the mortal bodies and bodies up to 8. Vasya, here the worms are already coming, yes. But part of Vasya separated and went up to the higher part of Vasya. If we're talking about subtle bodies, let's focus on the subtle bodies for now. And Mitya brought up the spirit. So let's figure out what spirit and soul are and higher up, because it raises a lot of questions. So after that, you'll start listing the 34 bodies, which are the subtle ones. They all kind of remained, which is the immortal part. And what kind of bodies are these?
Again, if we talk about that concept we discussed, it's karmic, then the bodies are causal, buddhic, and atmanic. So the combination of these bodies, that is the immortal bodies. Vasya, they went off over there. But that would be extremely rough. Because in fact, it went off, so to speak. The atmanic body didn't go anywhere. Because it's always there. Because the atmanic body is the upper part of the multidimensionality of the spirit. The buddhic body probably didn't go either. The lower layers went off.
So if we take, let's say, an iPhone, yes. Sorry, there's the cloud. Yes. Where the photos are always stored in the cloud. Yes. If I lost my iPhone, or if I broke it or smashed it, then the energetic copy will seemingly remain there. It will remain there, yes. Great, about the iPhone. Yes, very clear. And in the end, this part, which is like a layered cake from those bodies that didn't remain as a physical body, are the soul that will actually be quite rough too.
Tell me more about it. This topic is actually at the level of physical words. Describing it is extremely, extremely difficult. How do I approach this in my practice? There is a creator, a God creator, the absolute, the very top part that chooses absolutely everything, in which everything is one is all, infinite, wise. Energy, which exists outside of time, outside of space, where everything happens as a single moment. On the one hand, on the other hand, moments like that, there isn't thing.
But this topic doesn't really interest us right now. Because you are me, I am you, the viewers and the iPhone, it's all one, and we are all gathered here for ourselves.
Yes. But when the creator starts the game, this very game of life, let's put it that way, he brings it down here. It's like bringing into the world, it gives birth at a certain level, let's conditionally call it, the higher self. It gives birth to the higher self, although again, the higher, I see it as its upper layer, that's the very atmanic layer. So this is already a connection with the absolute, with all of this eternal and infinite. So, and then again, this is an extremely complex topic. I haven't analyzed it anywhere. In the previous interviews that were on your channels, yes, we didn't talk about this either. Exclusive, guys, exclusive.
Yes, exclusive.
The topic is incredibly complex to describe because when you dive into it, you see so many multidimensional interweavings. It's still impossible to describe it with earthly mind. I live here, yes, I am a human being. I'm trying to interpret with earthly words, with an earthly mind, what I see there. Yes? How much have you tried to get irritated? Well, we'll give it a try. Yes, a sensation. A sensation, so I see it as a kind of pyramid, which is up top, and it smoothly descends down. And the higher self is also multidimensional. Actually, when we talk about the higher self, I'm referring to death in this world. It's just a tiny little ray of that very higher self. You can call it whatever. Wants to maybe call it the karmic body, whatever. Actually, this scheme with the bodies, it works well. Only in that case if you need to at least roughly understand what you're dealing with. When you've already let go of the special manifestation of all these physical, etheric, astral, and mental bodies, this whole scheme starts to seem very primitive to you. Because there are an enormous multidimensional number of levels, and you can't even call it a level. You just dive deeper and deeper over the years, deeper. And at each new stage of your immersion, you start to see the entire universe in a completely different way. And at each, as it were, new stage of your immersion, you somehow begin totally. I'll try to collect everything in a different way while we see the universe.
From here, I will try to collect what creates Brahman, some kind of sovereign spirit, God, and so on. This is something that we can't really grasp, so discussing it would be pointless. He created a certain creation based on some kind of design. Yes, he detached a piece of himself, so to speak. And this is that little piece. For us, it's like a sea ocean. For him, it's just a spark. It's the higher self. Conditionally, yes. The higher self, how does it then come to earth?
The higher self enters matter, gaining self-realization. With each layer of this dense matter, it realizes itself a little differently, right? In each layer of this dense matter, it realizes itself a little differently. So, because of this, it resembles something like a bunch of grapes. So you have it up there, down, 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 down. And at some stage of understanding this eternal and infinite, the higher self, in its journey, eventually comes to incarnate on earth.
Great. And this higher self, as it descends into matter, acquires this layered pie of energy bodies, some of which will remain on earth along with the worms. When he dies there, part of them will connect a little later.
Read it, yes.
Spirit, soul, and higher self. What is that?
Help me understand. The spirit is all that is eternal, infinite, and multidimensional. All these little grapes, practically, probably up to the creator. All of this is usually in those schools that fight it like this. This is the spirit. They call it by the word spirit. And by the way, look, you can't lose the spirit. You can't sell it there because of the devil. You can't do anything with it at all because it is so eternal and infinite and wise that it cannot cry or suffer. It is always in harmony and in ballet. And the soul is what is accumulated throughout this life.
Okay. So we more or less understood the coordinate system.
Roughly speaking, if we now connect this with the mental, astral, and etheric bodies, well, conditionally the combination of the entire experience that accumulates in the astral, etheric, and mental bodies throughout this life, this entire experience can be conditionally called the term soul. And then, by the way, this very idea that it can be sold, to whom it can be sold. I can climb the mountain like this, my soul, meaning my etheric body, astral body. You can easily connect to the game with a friend. So, I don't know, like climbing the mountain of Satanism, and he will give you energy, and you will give him your energy. Well, that's if we're talking about it in a dark way. Sold my soul to the devil.
All right? And if we're talking about the white side, then it's connecting to the egregore of universal love. Well, for example, yes. There is such an egregore, for example. Yes. Yes, of course. So I connected to the egregore of universal love. The devil is not the focus for now. Yes. What's happening? What does that mean? What does it mean to connect to the egregore? Yes.
Well, it's a specific action. So you've tuned into the egregore.
You connect to it. You give it energy, and it gives you energy in turn.
It's like a completely separate topic, a whole separate topic.
Friends, write in the comments. We will definitely figure out what can be sold and what can't be sold. But actually, it's interesting to talk about. So you load it into the body, and you say, you need to identify yourself with the astral realm. This is the third time I'm trying to say this word, and for some reason, I'm not doing very well. Apparently, I've progressed less than you here, but I want to understand. You are part of the creation. The spark, the creator. This is all created. Yes. And the creator is like a cool game. Let me stick my piece in there. It sticks you in there. You come from childhood like this, so something's not right here. I think I'll just go. Don't get left behind either. I'm going to be doing this. So why? The creator created everything, invented the game, and put you here on earth. Why do you want to go against his will?
That's a good question. Like, really, yes, in this very...
Well, that's his will, it turns out. Well, I mean, me...
Actually, I'm curious, what if his will is for you to disidentify and come to your spirit?
So why come up with this whole game then? This whole game? Well, that makes sense, right? So, on one hand... So, how would you answer this question?
How I see this for myself. Again, the creator, he just gave unlimited freedom to do whatever you want. It's a bit wild. It sounds, but from certain levels of approach, there, to the higher self. From certain heights, I don't even see karma there. So it just gets lost there. It's like the very idea of karma just disappears. Well, completely to zero.
Does that mean I can do whatever I want? Let's put it this way. If there's no karma, so that means total permissiveness then. Should I speak under the camera or not?
Well, of course. But from the perspective of the higher self, you can do absolutely anything. Everything is experience. Everything is experience. How many times have I been there? Any topic, everything is experience.
But what about this boomerang? Like a club or a derivative of the law of balance that, so I can do whatever I want, but there will be consequences for it.
Yes, there will be consequences for that, but not always.
Okay.
No consequences. You need to look from the higher self view.
All right. We figured out that there are subtle bodies. We figured out what part of the subtle bodies forms a certain foundation of spirit and soul. Well, because it's kind of a unified whole. There are a lot of opinions related to how past lives work. And there are E.K. Newton, Brahman Vasya, and many, many of his followers who have conducted, well, probably hundreds, if not millions, of sessions of regression hypnosis, where a person enters a trance state and reviews his past lives. And moreover, he doesn't just review, he also corrects some things, and something changes in his life physically. What do you think about this concept as a whole? Do you think it is complete? So, about past lives, as Newton describes, that the soul is reborn, that we accumulate experience. Do you agree with this whole concept? Well, yes. Then the question is this. You often talk about the fact that they're a bit higher. Time. No, everything there is one. And everything happens simultaneously. Many masters talk about this very often. So, how do past lives work then? Why? We access past lives, but we can't access the future if there's no time there.
Yes, that's a very good question. Actually, look, again, let's go back to that story with the grapes. Different levels, different layers, different strata, different perceptions of the universe from each of these levels, from each of these layers. Here we are on our planet, right here on planet Earth. There is time, there is distance. There is, conditionally, how much do we have right now? 17 hours that you need to spend to fly from Bali to Moscow. If they allow direct flights, it will be 9 hours. Here in these dimensions on this Earth, well, in the astral plane of our planet and so on, there is the past, there is the future, there is time, there is distance. So if we speak from here, specifically from this layer, then we can indeed see our past life. Your life before last, your life before that, and so on. But if you reach a higher level, I mean, to that eternal and infinite place, then you are at a certain level, at a high level already. So it's really a matter of getting there. It's one thing to talk about it and another thing to actually go there and see it for yourself. I was actually there at those levels where everything is one in the moment. How much? In 25 years of practice, I've been there about 3 times. These are very high levels, very high. It's precisely the shades. Yes, they're easy to see, but to truly immerse yourself in that, right into all this multidimensionality, and to see this, these are very high levels, and they lie far beyond the boundaries of earthly incarnations. In other words, this is a very important thought. By the way, guys, those who are watching here, very closely, you will hear me after death. After death, Vasya, who died, does not find himself in these bodies. He doesn't find himself at those levels of the higher self, which vibrate in a space beyond time, and that space is higher, much higher. Vasya, who died, finds himself on the second grape. That's the maximum. He's at these higher levels, so he needs to go there. Certain floras.
Listen, the first, the second, that was ethereal astral.
Well, I mean, kind of relate to it.
So, conditionally, to dry out its planes, the planes of the earth, yes, without going beyond the limits of earth. Yes, yes, yes. And here, and in Ukraine, and there's time here, so you can walk through the past wave. Yes, yes, the future is written, it is defined, and either it tells you again.
I'm here as a practitioner when I went into those specific layers beyond time and space. It means it looks like an eagle flying over the road. No, not over the road. He's flying right over the city. And he sees all these roads at the same time that exist, that go into the future, that go into the past, that go somewhere to the right, that go somewhere to the left. And he saw all the people, all the cars were driving on those highways.
In other words, everything you can imagine exists there.
There are a huge number of options, but there are certain main lines that are closest to realization, to a specific starting position in this city. So roughly speaking, saying yes if the observer is conditionally standing on this at the intersection between the first and second streets. Yes, so from here, most likely, if he goes this way, yes, there will be some kind of main branch there. So if you predict the future, including your own future life, you can see them too. Based on everything I'm saying,
Let's figure this one out.
let's figure this one out. You can see not only your past life, but you can also see all the options for your future life. It will look like a certain main branch that you see with a certain degree of probability, understanding that it can also change at a certain stage.
A practical question. Let's go. If people go to look at past lives to understand that everything here is not random, that, in general, what I'm doing today, I probably did yesterday and the day before, and while living out some karmas, until I live through or fulfill certain soul tasks related to developing some energies, then what's there to see in a future life?
You know, when you touch that eternal higher energy, it becomes so incredibly interesting how it all is structured, how the universe is structured. So here it's more like an exploratory story. I got it, yes. And by the way, you know what? I want to comment on this a little bit, if you allow me, in one or two phrases. A lot of guys who come and ask, what is the purpose of the higher self? I tell them, that is, there are a lot of utilitarian, in fact, pure practical things there. Make the right decisions, more balanced, more harmonious, like how to get out of that hole you dug yourself into, because from up there, you can see better how to earn more money, who to live with better, more harmoniously, your partner, so to speak, and so on and so forth. We might discuss this separately today, but the most important thing is that people come to these topics thinking, yes, that their mind thinks about how much practical benefit there is. What will this bring me? And in fact, in the end, everyone tells me, guys, absolutely everyone who touches even a little bit on the higher self, it will bring me this. And in fact, in the end, everyone tells me, guys, absolutely everyone who touches even a little bit on the higher self. I think the main practical benefit of this is that you have touched that energy. You felt yourself as a whole part of the universe. You felt that eternity and infinity, and that's it. And that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing, that this path brings the deepest mystical experience, and they say it in unison. Absolutely everyone. And the viewers who might come to me someday, those who are watching this interview right now, 100% of them come to the same conclusion. Who will come to me? Those who are watching this interview right now, 100% of them come to the same conclusion. And this is exactly it. This is the most important value.
But we will definitely talk in this interview about what practical benefits can be gained from contact with the higher self. And for the mind, your body also exists in matter. You can certainly say that I'm an eternal spirit, but you probably came here by taxi, not on foot.
Well, yeah, the whole spirit arrived by taxi.
Yeah, by taxi. That's fine too. And the taxi is part of God. And since it's really hot outside right now, and the heat is also part of God, if you took the cheapest taxi, you probably sweated a lot, and everything will be just fine. And your spirit, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really care, but you do. So we're going to break these things down, because most of the people watching us are interested in practical forms. I know how to pay off a mortgage. Why have kids grown up and they don't want to talk to me? Why did my husband start drinking, and what should I do about it? To divorce or not to divorce? These are most everyday and simple questions. And in fact, many esotericists, very often they are bypassed by the country like this, but it's all earthly rather than talking about it. Here there is an eternal spirit, there is the future of life, parallel realities. It's also interesting. What about your mortgage? But we definitely talk about that. I want to wrap up the topic of past lives a little bit. To watch this video until the end. You will find the answers. I will choose from it. But still, we would even have a report of knowledge in front of me, so I might not ask everything. And that's why it's a long interview, but it's rich. I want to ask about the afterlife experience that happens when a person leaves their physical body. Well, the physical body is left there along with all these four bodies. They say there's such a concept. Let's say the wheel of Samsara. They say it's been thousands of years. Let's say, what is Samsara and how do you understand it? Does this relate more to the Hindu tradition?
I've actually gone over this topic many times. I really like it. Look, if we understand Samsara as the cycle of rebirths that one must escape from, then it's essential. From the perspective of the higher self, I have never seen confirmation of this theory, but I saw how it appeared. The thing is, The vibrations on this planet were much lower before it was lower than it is now.
Well, how much earlier?
Well, there you go. 1,000 years ago, it came. No, that's right. Yes. In the not so distant past for the spirit.
Of course, we're talking to a person who looks 10 lives ahead. We need to clarify, after all, how high we are going in the elevator. Yes, exactly.
The vibrations were much, much denser. Much denser.
So you mean like the times of the Crusades?
Yes, conditionally, yes, the times of the Crusades. And even earlier, actually. So even earlier, even before Christianity. Basically, I don't know, like they're maybe around 200 years BC, 300 years BC. That's the part I'm focusing on right now. Just when Hinduism started to actively manifest in all its beauty. It's already quite ancient, and even probably even more ancient, I think like 3-4 years ago. That's not the point, really. The point is that in all those times, the vibrations were low. If you were to approach, say, a medieval peasant or, I don't know, someone from the Hindus from a very long time ago and told them about self-love, about uncovering the inner child son from a long time ago and told him about self-love, about uncovering the inner child son, about, I don't know, about human value.
He would have hit you with a stick, the one that drives the cow. He would have hit you with it, right?
Hit you.
So you want to say that this knowledge is quite ancient. Do you think they are outdated?
They were made at that time.
Well, that's interesting then in continuation.
That's my perspective. That's very important. Because in fact, I almost never do, well, I try to never convey my own perspective from the level of the mind. I always go as deep as possible and check.
Let's have a little discussion here. There are different viewpoints on this topic. The first viewpoint comes from ancient Egypt. There exists the Egyptian Book of the Dead. In fact, it's not really a book at all, but basically just transcribed glyphs from all the tombs that they could excavate. And there are descriptions of scenes of judgment, how to come to the court. And essentially, this is what Egyptologists say who are not into esotericism. They say from these inscriptions, it's clear the most terrifying thing for the Egyptians was to come back here. And that's why they wrote themselves instructions to escape. So it's like getting out of Samsara. For the Egyptians, it was to come back here. And that's why they wrote themselves instructions to get out of here. So it's like getting out of Samsara? In other words, it clashes. There's another viewpoint, so that's from there. There's another perspective. There are exorcists who work with entities, and there are many stories about what an entity means, that a person died, and they ended up at a council, and there at the council, they were told, aha, you'll suffer some more, and then they went off to suffer again, and they suck energy out of him. So there are different viewpoints like that. I specifically laid it all out on the table. Let's sort through this jumble. How is it coming together for you? Into what picture, what coordinate system? Is it coming together for you? Still, there are Indians who say that there is samsara, and you say that maybe it's outdated. There are Egyptians who wrote this and seem to have practiced for a long time because they were priests, who went down there, spent all their time right. And there are also accordingly. So there are different people who talk about the afterlife experience, and there's some kind of council there, and all sorts of things happen. Tell me, how does your coordinate system describe all of this?
It's very simple. It doesn't really contradict. Tell me.
Asya is dead.
Asya is dead. Yeah, Asya is dead.
He can't go beyond the boundaries of Earth. He can't rise up there to the spirit.
So indeed, he is truly here, embodying a certain layer of spirit.
And from reincarnation, one can say, that's it. I don't want this anymore. I'm fine here. If they truly want to.
What does that mean? Being there, your opinion changes compared to being here. If we look at things from here, from the mind, and then access the higher self, for you, including this layer of the higher self, which isn't really that high in the afterlife of this earth, your attitude changes.
So it's much simpler there than it seems here.
Everything seems perfect there.
Here you sweat in a taxi, and there it's like being a gambler. I should play some more on PlayStation.
It's a certain paradox that we encounter when we practice what's called answering questions from the higher self. Basically, you want to ask something to the higher self. Something that you want. For example, you're really worried about things here. You give an example today about divorces, whether to divorce husband or not. You're just walking around. You're worried This husband has been asking me so much, to put it bluntly, just like that. Already, I can't. You reach the level of the higher self. I and you, again, depending on how deep you go, but if it's a really deep dive, then you see where you met this husband in a past life. Why did you choose to meet in this life at all? And what lessons did you choose to go through here? From the mind's perspective, it all seems completely incomprehensible. Nonsense, but there it looks like this, like the deepest knowledge, the deepest experience, a mystical experience. It's truly a deep mystical experience. And understand all this beauty. Your relationship with your husband, including the bad parts of the relationship. You're just sitting there and you come out of there, yes, and you don't want to divorce your husband anymore. Or maybe you do want to, but the problem is that from there it looks different, This idea of relationships with your husband is so different that when you go in there, you've already forgotten all the problems you had here. Completely. You've just forgotten about them.
I forgot.
Or I forgot.
I didn't get up anymore. I just stayed in bed.
I forgot. Or I forgot. If we're talking about the divorce from a wife, and still, let's get back to this. Vasya died. And accordingly, if he felt that his life here was really heavy, complicated, difficult for his mind.
It seemed like I was getting to something I understand. Yes, you can, but still, let me go back to the question and try to summarize. So you're saying something like, from the mind, this is some kind of samsara, I want to get out, or someone is talking about it because we have these comments. I'm reading these comments and I say, listen guys, just tell me that I'm done, I'm out. I say, well, okay. And getting there is still a choice, in your opinion. And just from there, this game will turn out to be more interesting. And in a different way, it's like, well, let me dive in there again and load myself into a body now. A giant, or I could load myself into the body of another race, another gender, and so on. So, roughly speaking, this circle of samsara that everyone is trying to break free from, in your understanding, it's like an outdated concept, just...
I'll put it this way, it's outdated, but it was effective. It's time. Because again, let's return to this topic. The world was completely different. It was very dense. What needed to be done to touch those higher bodies in that world? So, to renounce matter. To renounce everything, to go to the mountains and meditate for 10 years. As of today, those techniques for connecting with the higher self, basically, how long do we do them for? For 6 months? Back then, they needed to be done for years, since childhood. Because the Earth's vibration was completely different. What's happening? What exactly do you do in 6 months? Can you say, well, look, we have the course in 2 forms. The first format is GP. You get the entire course and my personal guidance. There's a second format, which is the discounted groups for 6 months. The first month is about stopping the inner dialogue to free up internal space so that in a month or 2 or 3, you can start doing more serious practices. Everyone has a huge number of thoughts in their head, a huge amount of emotions. That's all. The radio works 24/7. It really interferes with further practices. It really interferes a lot. So the entire first month is about stopping the inner dialogue. The second month is about working with blocks, serious traumas, boundaries, and limitations. With that same ego we talked about today, with egregores and so on, with connections to egregores, including the egregore of gender, for example, the egregore of age, and so on. For contacting the higher self, this can be a hindrance, at least for the moment of this practice. So the third month is actually about making contact with the higher self. The main practice is about disidentification. The moment of this practice. So the third month is actually about making contact with the higher self. The main practice is disidentification. After this, after the third month, a person is at least able to touch, even if just slightly. At least to touch the higher self slightly, because the path of the higher self is limitless. It's absolutely eternal. It's many, many years ahead, but at least the light and initial elements of this contact can be grasped in the third month. Years ahead, but at least the light and initial elements of this contact can be grasped in the third month. In the fourth month, it's about answers to questions. Everything that people are waiting for. Answers to questions through the higher self. Simple, everyday matters like those over there. Where to work, who to live with, where to go, where not to go, all these things. All of this can be easily reviewed in the USA. So they connect themselves, ask questions, and get answers. But about simple ones. This is in the fourth month. In the fifth month, the answers to questions are more complex, more global. What kind of simple questions are those? Can you give an example? The simplest example, actually, that I tell everyone in the very first lecture. What should I eat for breakfast? A pear or an apple? That's an absolutely strange question, but you can test the connection with the higher self on it. For example, you wanted a pear from your mind, but then you connected with the higher self and realized that today you can do without food.
Okay, let's say so.
Very economical. Or
More complex questions.
I want to go to Egypt. I want to go, you connect with the higher self and see that you don't need to go to Egypt this year. Why don't you go to Indonesia or Malaysia or somewhere like Dubai? Because in Egypt, for example, there might be some kind of catastrophe.
Then you log into your online banking and they tell you you're going to Scissoran. And you're like, higher self, what is it? Why?
Where can I get some money? By the way, yes, where to work? You can also look into this through the higher self, but that's already a more complex question. That's already more complex. Yeah, that's already more complex. It's already in the fifth month.
But why is there a difference between more complex questions and simpler ones?
I rely solely on my mind because the mind is still foreign to a person. It has never touched on this topic in their life. So he lived his whole life in his mind. He lived in his body. He never touched on the former self at all, except for those 2 years of his life. If I say, and here he touches on it, the mind still has a very strong influence. It really gets in the way. It really throws you off. And questions about oneself, for example, some of the most difficult questions, especially if they concern vital issues. So, for example, I don't know, when will I die? This is a very, very, very exciting topic for the mind. And it can also be seen in the higher self. So you can see the day of death. Well, or you can see the options for the day of death. That's a separate topic. In the fifth month, we move on to complex topics. First of all, it's the topic of destiny. It's essential to know why you came here. The topic of contact with past lives is definitely through the higher self. For example, the topic of contact with God, by the way, is a separate one. The practice is extremely interesting, but it's more for those esotericists who are continuing to develop in this area. And in the sixth month, everything that didn't fit into the first 5, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Like, for example, I have a practice. And in this special group, it will be a practice that I call the matrix souls. But that's not what people mainly talk about. It's a specific technique, how to see the connections between souls with the help of the higher self. So, for example, you have 10 acquaintances. Yes, which of them did you meet in a past life? Who were you to each other? You might have close friends, acquaintances, close relatives, or maybe from the same family line, or maybe from some other ones altogether. Did you share a bunch of lives together? Or maybe not. Through the higher self, all of this can be seen, and so on. There's a whole series of practices there that didn't make it into the previous 5 months.
Friends, for those who are interested, a similar course or a similar practice, you can find the contacts in the description. I have a question. There's an opinion that people who can turn off their thoughts make up about 30% of the planet, no more. And this is related to hypnotizability, hypnosis, because, again, this opinion claims that it's pretty much the same. Can everyone learn to connect with their higher self? Me?
Well, listen, based on the statistics, Mao, I've gathered, over 11 years, about 60% managed to connect with the higher self. I'm currently in the process of the course.
And how does it happen? Do you see the picture? Do you hear a voice?
No, that's a shift. So you're shifting, roughly speaking, if we use Castaneda, then you're shifting your disassembly higher into those very Castaneda. Then you displace yours. Disassembly higher into those very higher bodies. And at some point, you just start to feel like an eternal spirit. This is a very important topic. You can connect with your higher self through channeling. You can do it through, regression hypnosis, or you can do it directly.
But why isn't regression hypnosis perhaps direct?
Regression hypnosis leads you there. What's the difference? It leads you there, and we had experiments, we had focus groups, just a lot of research on this topic. We conducted them because I have a school for the higher self, and I'm actually one of the largest. It's exactly these specialized schools focused solely on the higher self that I have. And we took focus groups, leading them to the higher self through hypnosis. And a person would come to their higher self through various experiences after a certain amount of time. There's a whole complex there.
Again, what difference does it make?
The difference is significant. The difference is significant. The guys who come in through regression hypnosis, they don't hold on. Practically no one can hold on to it. They quickly revert back. It's like, taking someone on a tour. You just went on a tour.
Well, what's the difference? You got an answer.
You got the answers, yes. But at the same time, you don't have a constant connection with your own self. Yes, I understand.
The answer is clear. And you're saying that 60% can really make that connection.
Yes, 60% is the average statistic for the group, 60% themselves. Yes. They come to this. The remaining 40%, well, I mentioned this a bit today. There's a professional psychotherapist in my course who works with blocks. First and foremost, it's about the blocks with all sorts of fears, limitations, and so on. Usually it looks like this. A person is trying to reach a higher state, but they hit a wall. It's like you're sitting in emptiness and feeling nothing. There's no goodness, no harmony, no high energies, no vibrations, no light. There's absolutely nothing there. So there's no shift in the assembly up there. Just a certain emptiness. Usually it's because a person has some deep trauma or a block or something else. Then it's worth it for them to see a psychotherapist. There's a special person for that and they work through it. And so if they work with him, then the percentage, it probably increases to 99.
There's an opinion that, and I actually agree with this opinion, that when you're deep in a trance, it's quite difficult to analyze things in the moment. Because, well, when you're in meditation or in a trance, basically, it's again a matter of terminology. When you can connect to the higher self, you're in a state of a somewhat disconnected analytical center of the brain. And when information comes to you and you need to dig a bit deeper and understand some cause and effect relationships, because, well, when you're in meditation or in a trance, basically, it's again a matter of terminology. When you can connect to the higher self, you're in a state of a somewhat disconnected analytical center of the brain. And when information comes to you and you need to dig a bit deeper and understand some cause and effect relationships, what should you do? What is your purpose? And how should you act if you find yourself in such a life situation? Because you feel like you have to express yourself, right? But you have a dog here, a mortgage, and the kids are going to school, so you need to transfer them to another school. And that's it. And in that moment, you can't analyze, because as soon as you start analyzing, it kicks you out of the trance. And here we have supporters of guided meditation or hypnosis. As you say, when a person is guided, they claim that it's a more effective way than when the person is meditating on their own. When he has a short question, he can rise up, connect, and take a look. But when he needs to explore, it's better for someone to guide him. What do you think about that?
I agree. If a person just has a question about finding their purpose and moving on, yes, that's true. You see, that's the path I'm talking about. It's interesting because you always have it, your own connection with the higher self. You don't need to go to therapists. You're your own psychotherapist, your own hypnotist. If we talk from a practical standpoint, you're saving a ton of money because you can reach that level and see everything by yourself at any time. And the most important thing is that it's a path for those guys who want not just to learn something and move on. They want to change. They want to radically change their lives. They want to self-develop. So these are the esoteric people, esoteric individuals who come into this for spiritual development. Here are the esoteric people, esoteric individuals who come into this for spiritual development.
How can you be sure that this isn't some kind of connection, that it's not some entity, but rather true information that comes?
The method of disidentification itself guarantees that you reach a level where you're not connected. There isn't a single initiation into a school, into an egregore or something else, I don't know, into the egregore of magic in one form or another. When people try to reach out to me, I often get messages saying, you're telling everything wrong. Let's bring you to our school. In our school, everything will be right for you. That's right. Very often, they bring people and message me privately. And it's not my path. Absolutely. I always tell everyone, no, that is no experiments with energy or anything. I never participate in that, because the path of the higher self in its purest form is when you completely disidentify yourself, and at some point your inner lotus flower starts to unfold naturally, just in the process of disidentification. It's like, yeah, for you to touch it, the higher self, you don't need to touch it. You need to remove everything that hinders that contact. That's often.
Well, how can you be sure that you've removed it? So, if you've never tried alcohol since childhood and grew up as if...
It's very noticeable. It's like cleaning your inner room of clutter. So you have your inner room, right? And when you clear it of everything, at some point you realize that the room has become brighter. Just naturally, you didn't turn on the light, you just cleaned the room. It became cleaner, right? And then you took a sponge and wiped the window, and outside the glass, the sun is shining. It's always there. The higher self is always there behind the glass. And this sunlight starts to naturally come into that room.
So how can you check if it's a heart attack? So you're saying the question is incorrect? Because if you've properly removed all the blocks and the progressor, then it can't be off. Okay? The information came to the person. He needs to do this. He's going to go there.
Not quite. Yeah, not quite. You need to move on to answering questions only after the state of the higher self. I am a person who can do it quickly, to focus on oneself. Only after that.
All right, so he has learned everything. To enter this quick state, the answer comes and it doesn't happen. What to do?
So that's incorrect.
What's wrong?
The higher self is wrong. I interpreted it incorrectly. If you enter the higher self and it's 100% the higher self, and the criteria for the higher self, once again, for everyone, is this natural unfolding of those high energies during the process of unblocking. They unfold by themselves. They unfolded. That's it. You can really feel the shift in the assembly. Over there, high, pure, everything is bright, everything is great. Then you start asking questions and getting answers by changing your attitude. Because as soon as you formulate a question, you immediately get a certain answer, a certain attitude towards this answer. So again, to make it as clear as possible right now, here's an example with Egypt. For example, you want to go there in the mind. The higher self entered. Close your eyes. It entered. That's it. Fabulous. To light, love, and goodness, everything is great. It unfolded by itself. You've already reached that level. You clearly know that it's him because, again, you can't confuse it with anything else. It's so bright, so strong, that once you experience it, you can never confuse it with anything else. Exclusively from within yourself. It's your own energy that unfolds from within, only like that. Here. And you ask yourself there, and now at this level, what is my attitude towards the trip to Sigi? You immediately become aware. You want to go, but you're not going.
All right. You're sitting there thinking, I'm going on vacation to Thailand. You're sitting there visualizing seashells. The sea, I already imagined it, almost bought the ticket. You sit in Ishi, and it says, go to Egypt in May, to Thebes, the old capital. For example, you're like that.
But why? Can we find out? So what's it about?
Well, they say there are energies, some kind of convergences, something like that. You arrive, it's plus 45 there. You're sitting there thinking, what am I doing here?
If this is really a contact with the higher self, and if the mind hasn't interfered, then the answers you get there should come true 100% of the time. So if they don't come true, something's not right. Should come true 100% of the time.
So if they don't come true, something's not right.
Something's not finished.
So mind got involved. Yeah. And what do you need to do? Go back and see where the mind got involved.
Try to figure it out. What was the reason?
Okay. A person who has been trained and learned to connect with their higher self, he can connect with the higher self of his neighbor or his daughter. For example, over the years.
Can you do that? Partially. I'll describe it now. Look, for example, at Eurovision. This is the stage you're at. Conditionally speaking, you start to see astral entities, the classic of Eurovision. So at the first stage, you see your astral body, and only then do you start to see these specific shadows in the corners. And these shadows gain more clarity, more brightness, and so on. Usually that's how it's done. At the first stage, you look at yourself, and only then after a while, you see everything that is around you on the same layer. Because if you can't see yourself, then it will be extremely difficult to see what's around you. In other words, what am I getting at? The same thing works with the higher self. If you feel your higher self very well, like perfectly feel your higher self. You remember your past lives well, you remember well the whole journey, the whole cycle, at least the cycle, how well you really feel. You understand why you came here, your purpose, you see yourself as the higher self. I've already studied, so it will be easier for you to connect with the higher self. I'm another person. I don't know why it works that way. But you said you can do it partially. Partially because, well, look, for 25 years, I've been exploring my higher self. And about 2 years ago, I realized that I can now connect with the higher self. I am another person. And you can connect with my higher self. And what information can you get I learned in school to determine the age of the soul, specifically in that projection of the higher self that is right here. This is the very first, the most important. It's a kind of shell of the higher self.
Why know the age of the soul, especially since if the soul, at least part of it, as we understand, is immortal, then what's the point of knowing the age if there's no time there? By the way, there's more practical meaning to it than fundamental.
There is no time. By the way, there's more practical meaning to it than fundamental. Because from a fundamental perspective, yes, everything is one. Everything exists. One, there is no time, and none of this exists. But from a practical standpoint, let's say younger souls behave more youthful. In any case, they often slip into unconsciousness. They often lose connection with the mind, and the mind goes out of control and takes on various grotesque traits. So he can start being very selfish. He can start being very blocked there with all sorts of blocks, beliefs, and so on, right? And the ability to see who is in front of you, what kind of person they are, and what to expect from them. Because today, look, you go on Instagram, and there are tons of spiritual gurus who claim to be spiritual gurus there. In 85, yes, generation level 200. You look at their age in the soul, and the age is quite small. Small, really very small, let's say at the level of a teenager. Yes, but how many incarnations on earth? Doesn't really matter, so to speak. That's just the order of what we're talking about. When you can look back at how many incarnations there have been on earth, right? Can you look at that? In general, the age of the soul and age are not the same. They don't correlate. They're slightly different things. Because the age of the soul, as I see it, is more like a cycle of life. They can be here, they can be on some serious, they can be somewhere else, but it's all still within the same illusion of space and time. When the spirit goes into a cycle, there are many lives, and there is a past life, there is a next life, and so on. So you shouldn't think that in the afterlife, after we leave this planet to another planet, to Alpha Centauri, for example, you shouldn't think that on Alpha Centauri we will have some new things, because there, everything will reset and something will start again from scratch.
This is indeed considering that Alpha Centauri has time.
Yes, time.
Up there where there is no time, there is no such age. And you can look and say, what is my age, my soul? There is no such age. And you can look and say, what is my age, my soul? I can
tell by the photo. And
you can look at my soul's age right now.
I don't like doing that. I'll explain. I can do that. I can write you talent, a personal message if yes, I want to. The thing is, if you write to someone and tell them yes, that they have a high age. So I had a few cases where the guys were very experienced, really strong in practice, strong esotericists with a strong connection to the higher. I was going into a wild state, like really wild. And it was like, guys, you all here are just not people at all. Look at me like this. If you say too little, then my subscribers will leave.
You won't leave, will you?
You will stay, right? What if he says that I have a small soul age? Will you keep watching me?
Please write in the comments. I'm really worried about this topic.
And if you tell them too little, then a person might get offended. And I've had stories like that too.
It's okay if you say one thing and 5 other esotericists say something else. And that will make you doubt, for example, what you're saying.
No, because I have a lot of different practices, various ones that come to me through the higher self. I bring them up in my courses or in my lectures for interviews or anywhere else, only those that I'm 100% sure about. I have a whole series there, like it's a separate one. Archive, practices in work. I personally use them for myself, like I frequently check them out for various purposes, such as explore, evaluate, and so on.
How do you personally, like you say, bring out only what you've verified? And how do you verify that this information is true?
Very simple. I have, again, a bunch of guys, a bunch of graduates who have mastered this practice well, including this one, including my wife. She has an excellent connection with the higher self. And for example, we look at a certain person for the age of his spirit, and we do a blind test. I do it separately. My wife does it separately. These guys do it separately. And then we combine our findings. But does it ever match? Does it happen that you find a match or not? No, I don't even check the souls.
Well, do you look at something and check the soul? Well, no, I don't even check the souls. You can view so much, right? Can it be that you just find it in the collective? In some kind of bubble, those are your students. They are connected to your egregore. Or in other words, you give a deadline to the egregore.
That's a good question. As far as I remember, there wasn't anything like that. We didn't have that much work on forecasting. But everything that happened came true.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions. And then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over. I'll be waiting for you.
Again, in Hinduism, as in ancient tradition, there is this understanding about, in the Kali Yuga, the Gesati Yuga, there is a stage of raising consciousness and a stage of falling consciousness. What do you think about this concept? Do you share it, and where do you think we are? Do you share it?
This is exactly related to our conversation today, which isn't finished yet. Now, I think we can smoothly wrap up the topic about leaving this world of samsara and so on. But for me, it's absolutely interconnected. I've already talked a bit about this, and I'll continue. Yes, here, the world used to be much denser. It's proven in no time. Telekinesis in the late 70s was much harder to achieve than it is today. I just have one teacher, very good close friend of mine. What is telekinesis? He practices telekinesis. Moving objects, moving, yes. And his teacher told him that in the 70s of the last century, to master telekinesis, it was necessary to probably about 5 years of practice, something like that. And nowadays, well, in about 7-8 months, everything has become easier. All the practices have become easier.
Do you agree that it's unlikely to be some kind of statistical research?
Yes. It's not research, but based on my group, across all my groups, which have been a huge number of groups, probably 18, 20 over all these years, with about 100 people in each group, I see that it becomes easier and easier for them over the years. I don't think that means, does that mean a great transition is coming? The transition is already happening. Absolutely right. I'm not a supporter of all these apocalyptic scenarios about the future. I've always told everyone, and will keep saying, that I clearly see we're moving upward. Yes, we're moving upward through all sorts of things. These twists and turns, through wars, through cataclysms, and so on. But these are all certain processes. A certain shedding of the heavy burden accumulated in past centuries down there to shine upward. I see the future actually very bright. I don't see anything wrong.
There is an opinion among esotericists, which is often voiced on my channel, that we are in a great transition, that those who don't transition will go who knows where. And we need to try to shed all this karma, otherwise we will be crushed by the rising vibrations, and you can have different attitudes towards this. By the way, please write what you think about this topic. What's your opinion? I don't have any opinions on this. I always focus on practices. When I looked into this topic, I saw that the world will just be different.
In 55 or 100 years from now, it will just be different. It will be cleaner, it will have higher vibrations, and the rules of the game will change. Those souls for whom these rules are unnecessary due to their age, experience, or something else, they simply won't choose to stay in this world. Experience? They just won't make the choice in favor of this world. There won't be a situation where someone didn't transition, and then they immediately removed you from here. I don't know, burned you or disposed of you. No, there will just be different rules of the game in the new world. It will be a gentler world. No, there will just be different rules of the game in the new world. There will be a gentler world. If, for example, for the spirit, you want to work in life like, I don't know, resilience, firmness, participating in military conflicts, that could be the spirit's desire. But if there are no more military conflicts in this world, then this world doesn't suit that goal. And then he can, yes, change planets, move to another branch of reality on this planet, or simply switch to a whole new planet following his goals. That's just how it is. But for someone up there to just take a spirit and, I don't know, erase them from here, that can't happen.
Do you have a colleague with whom you often discuss various scenarios, branches, parallel realities about the planet's curators and past civilizations? And there are many, many, many strong historical themes. In these discussions, there's little talk about what happens from the perspective of these curators' agenda. Yes, there is an opinion that what happens from the perspective of these curators' agenda? Yes, there is an opinion that Earth is a prison for souls. So, here, the souls are supposedly brought in by some reptilians. They keep them, torture them, and siphon their energy, like in the movie The Matrix. And basically, no one is allowed to escape from here.
This is, again, in my opinion, it's related to the topic of samsara, but I still haven't finished that thought. I'm going to do it now, after all. So, many centuries ago, there really was a reason to get out of here. Because both Buddhists, and I think the Egyptians, they really figured out how to complete the cycle of reincarnation on the planet, because it was very dense. Very dense. This is the medieval period, even before the Middle Ages. It was a tough period. I remember a number of my past lives from those periods. They were tough. You can take my word for it in this case. No one wanted to continue incarnating on such a planet. And I wanted to untie all the karmic knots as quickly as possible and get out of here. That's true. And it's the path of Buddhism. How do you tie all of this and leave for eternal nirvana? It definitely has its place. But it was specifically in that century at the time when all of this was done. Today, the planet has changed tremendously. That's exactly why I say that it all doesn't work at this stage anymore. Nowadays, everything looks a bit different. The world is becoming cleaner, and on the contrary, today I see many bright souls that used to leave this world. Yes, the world is becoming cleaner, and on the contrary, today I see many bright souls that used to leave this world. Yes, including perhaps according to the Buddhist scenario. From this world, yes, including perhaps according to the Buddhist scenario, it's like a certain key to just walk out the door. And today, on the contrary, they are coming.
I anticipate the critical comments that our viewers might write, and they often write very critical comments of the following nature. We have never been close to the total destruction of the planet in the form of a third nuclear war and a third world war. And the world has never been so close. The entire planet has never been put on lockdown and forced into quarantine. That didn't happen. We've never had such total digital control as we see now, when payment was made with a smile, and all these things. And we have never been on the brink of such a division in the world. When different camps spread apart, they clash with each other, and 8 billion people have never existed. Well, not like this. Such polar opinions, let's say, such a level of hatred and anger, stress and suffering and everything else.
What light are we talking about? These are people who have no contact with.
So,
that's it. Come to the course, but still things are. Listen. Again, no matter how many times I've been to the USA on this topic, is it all like this? It looks exclusively from the perspective of a mind that is afraid, that doesn't understand what's happening, and that hasn't yet realized everything that's going on here. Around him, yes, I mean, he has this contact with deeper levels, with hair. Could this be a way of avoiding something?
It's not okay. I don't have money, or I don't have some super high salary. I don't have, a house somewhere in Antalya, and my Metro card here is running out. But I have contact with my higher self, and in general, I don't need any of this. And I'd rather sit there. It's all so interesting. And here, basically, I don't need to manifest.
No, because, by the way, this is also a common theme. For some reason, people are very concerned about whether they will have manifestation, whether they will socialize when in contact with the higher self. Manifestation probably, it gets stronger with contact with the higher self. Because again, contact with the higher self is a very, very natural connection that everyone has, for example, in higher worlds. Not in our world, but in higher worlds. He has it from birth. And this doesn't stop those guys who are incarnating in these higher worlds to feel great and need to fulfill the missions for which they came here. Moreover, it only contributes to the fulfillment of those very missions. That's why, no, I would say no. When you have contact with your higher self, you clearly know why you came here. You can fulfill all the missions for which you came here much better. And most importantly, if it wouldn't be the case, if there weren't really any special missions here, then the spirit wouldn't come here at all. He would stay there. Since he came here, there must be a reason for him to come.
But can there be a conflict between the personality which says, well, wait, we've been going to the factory. We've been here for about 15 years, and the mortgage will be paid off. And I need to go somewhere like Egypt, or I need to learn, work through the body, and give someone a massage, so to speak.
Well, yes.
And this conflict arises. Can there be this conflict
In short, no, because a person who is already ready to connect with their higher self, his mind actually, he is already ready to some changes. Usually those guys who are not ready for changes, he wouldn't have come to my course.
But still, it's conflict in the personality. You say that it's just impossible if a person has a strong connection with their higher self. Why? Well, he received the information that I'm going to Egypt.
If you already have a strong connection with your higher self, then your personality has already dissolved quite a bit in the process of that connection. Take me, for example, look, do I associate myself with Danila? No. Do I associate myself with being a man? Well, kind of in the background, very, very distantly. Do I associate myself with, I don't know, with being Russian? No. Do I associate myself with my body? No. And it's true, I don't associate myself with my body at all. The spirit that came here in this body. So again, I've been in this field for many years, so I clearly know who I am, where I'm from, where I'm going, why I came here, what I'm doing here. And the personality gradually starts to fade away. When you enter your higher self, it slowly fades away, and fades away even more. That very depth of your own true personality, yours. That personality starts to manifest. And when you really come to a strong connection with your higher self, to deep answers to questions and so on, there's no one to argue with. He just disappeared.
But does that mean there's some kind of renunciation of material life? So if your personality is already dissolved, then material things aren't interesting to you? Very interesting. How do you exist in the material world without a personality?
I'm doing very well. The spirit that came into the personality to play the game here, he came here into this matter, into this personality to play the game. I know that it's me. I know that these are my hands, my legs. I know that all of this is mine. But at the same time, I don't identify myself with this. The closest analogy is like a driver who is driving a car. So the driver who is driving the car, not the autopilot that's in the car, is driving that very car. It's the driver who is at the wheel and steering. He knows that he is the driver and this is the car and he is driving that very car. He doesn't identify himself with the car. Most people identify themselves with the car, with the mind, meaning the software of that very thing. A car with an onboard computer, with anyone, but not with the driver. And when you truly start to feel like the driver again, as a deep mystical practice, then you clearly know that this is the car and what you came here for. This car is important to you because with this car, you fulfill the mission for which you came here. Otherwise, you wouldn't have come here.
Does this mean that human passions, they are foreign to you because on a soul level, they make no sense at all?
What do you understand by passions?
All those things that people derive pleasure from, that they strive for. For example, these are some bodily pleasures, like enjoying good food, having sex, specific things related to travel and material possessions. We can live in 2 square meters, basically, objectively, but can also live in 100 square meters.
I understand you. Look, here this question comes from the people who are asking it. I know for sure that, the answer to the question I'm about to discuss, you're probably speaking more from the perspective of the viewer. But those guys who are asking it don't fully understand what spirit really is. About the spirit has desire, the spirit has emotions. This is an extremely strange topic. But if the spirit, again, didn't have desires, it wouldn't have come here. It would have stayed there, and that's it. The spirit knows how to love very well. It knows how to experience joy and pleasure and so on. But this is true joy. The true pleasure of the spirit, it's purer, it's deeper, it's no longer connected to the mind. But when the spirit plays in all of this, it enjoys the process itself. Again, it enjoys it.
Why, if the spirit plays in all of this, does one spirit play on a yacht while another spirit plays where, basically, in a toilet, a hole in the street?
It all depends on the spirit's goal. In this life, it can play on a yacht, and in the next life, it plays where there's a hole in the street.
If there is some experience of the soul and accumulation, what changes? That is, roughly speaking, what distinguishes the experience of a soul that has already accumulated a certain number of incarnations or energy spent here, and those who are just starting to accumulate, do they have more of something in matter or not?
That's an interesting question, by the way. The guys who are complete beginners, you can really see them here. They come in 2 types. Either street kids, right, or flower kids. Street kids are those who grew up in some other worlds, for example, but in very harsh conditions. They come here and you can see that they seem a bit out of place in this world. 10 flowers, all following the exact same pattern. They grew up in higher, purer worlds. They come here and also don't fit in. Right here, they're both not of this world, but if the first ones are more like guys, then the second ones are, roughly speaking, elves. Some are really harsh, some are incomprehensible, some are survivalist, like that, yeah. And even by the standards of this world, the second ones are, roughly speaking, elves. What are they called? Yeah, elves from Ubud in Bali. By the way, there are a lot of guys who are really young souls who came here and didn't quite fit in. For a while, we were there analyzing the overall vibe of everything that was happening.
Well, what do you think about the people you see on the islands? Be it Phangan, be it Bali, be it someplace like Goa, for example. It's not really an island, but still. And there are a lot of people who dived in, so diving deep into spirituality. And this could be related to all sorts of experiences with medical experiments, some shamanic practices and everything. But it feels like some of these people, they dove in but couldn't come back up. So this topic consumed them and it actually broke them apart, but they couldn't put themselves back together. How do you understand why this is happening? That's you, brother. Just say it.
Honestly, I'll say this. Partly it could be young souls. But the ball is in what the essence is. Earlier was esotericism. She was in closed clans, closed organizations. Just recently, there was an episode on your channel about this topic. I talked in detail about the closed clans. As long as it stayed within the confines of these clans, only a small number of people had access to it. When all of this came out into the world in the 20th century, it's a separate topic. What caused all of this to happen? This is exactly related to a certain plan of the curator. Many started to touch upon it, esotericism, and they really began to run away from themselves. As I see it, they need to address some of their deep-rooted issues. Ideally, it would be better to resolve them with a psychotherapist. Instead, they were dealing with it through esotericism. Ideally, it would have been better to resolve it with a psychotherapist. They were trying to solve it through esotericism. Many were just feeding their egos. They really had nothing in their lives, but at least they could say, I became a great master there. Level 89. There. Yes, with a huge lineage and so on. I have been initiated into all magical schools. There, I don't know, the Alpha Centaurians greet me. They just come to me every evening on their flying saucers. And here it is. A lot of people these days, especially in Bali, especially in those places, are playing with esotericism. You can see it, especially if there's a connection with the higher. I can see that.
Tell me about these plans of the curators. We still haven't agreed on this topic. So, do you really think that on Earth there are some higher beings, let's call them civilizations, that control what's happening here and have an influence, and they are here sucking up energy? There are some higher beings on Earth, civilizations, let's call them, that control what's happening here and have an influence, and they are here sucking up energy. And all of this,
I'll put it this way. There are many layers of control here. So there's a layer, roughly speaking, at the level of the president who practically never makes any real decisions. Especially in Anglo-Saxon countries, that's exactly what I was talking about. There is a layer, a higher one, conditionally, like super governmental. So these are like some people are closed off in groups, yes, under certain keys, and that same Bilderberg Club is there and so on. So there are higher levels. What are these higher ones? Those same curators? No, what is that? Who are they? They are mostly disembodied souls that exist. They are here and they are represented on this planet. In order to implement the rules of the game here that they sign contracts for, the souls that come here, their goal is to implement certain rules of the game. They act like administrators. And if they don't do this, it will be very bad for the souls. Because, for example, warriors. The soul has a mission to come here and, for example, play a role in the war, a participation in the war. The curator will take and end all wars on the planet. While the souls have already arrived, the spirit will come to the curators and ask, this is his multidimensional ear of spirit, and will ask, what's going on at all?
how does it work with the energy surge that many esotericists talk about? And in general, this is evident in exorcism processes when people disconnect all sorts of attachments from themselves and feel much better and they have more energy.
Well, these are completely different topics.
Isn't that part of the curator's work?
Are you referring to the curators?
So they support this system?
Oh, are you referring to that? Well, It is indeed the case. Certain attachments, gregorial structures, these are all the rules of the game that are currently here. They are here for a reason. They are needed here for the balance that is currently established here, for the rules that are set up here, and so on, for the balance that is currently established here, for the rules that are set up here, and so on. But at this stage, we see a change in these very rules towards easing the overall energetic framework of our planets.
And this is a super big topic. We'll put a pin in that, but if you're interested and we gather enough comments, we'll definitely continue. Friends, today we had a very extensive interview. We talked with Danila and touched on a lot of different topics, of course. We couldn't dive that deep because, believe me, it was challenging for me to moderate, but I tried to get to the essence for you. If you found something particularly interesting, or if there's something you'd like to hear more about, let me know, and we'll do another separate interview. Thank you. Write to me about it, and we'll do another separate interview. Thank you.